Got a chainsaw in my hand, a couple miles of fence to mend. Morning sun just cutting through the pines. That oil and sawdust smell, your buck knife on my belt. This Carhartt coat was yours, but now it's mine. Standing in this field, I'm alone, but I still feel close to you. Yeah, I know that you are there somewhere beyond the clouds. So ain't it kinda crazy how I'm close to you? Yeah, you left too soon. I know you're gone, it don't seem real, but every day I still feel close to you. When I hear an old Don Williams song or see an old red Ford trucking on, it's almost like you ain't that far away. Kinda like a bottle on that shelf.
She danced through life with grace, a gentle smile, a steady pace, a heart that welcomed, warm and wide, with mischief always tucked inside. From country roads to crowded halls, from harvest days to dance night calls. She built a life in simple ways, but filled our hearts for all our days. With flower-dusted hands and stories told, with laughter bright and spirit bold, she gave her love without demand and left her mark on every hand. No child her own, yet countless still, were shaped by her enduring will. For love like hers does not divide, it gathers all and holds them wide. So think of her in songs and cheer, in popcorn balls and friends held dear. For though she's gone from what we see, she lives on in our memory. My name is Candace Anderson of Reflections Funeral and Cremation Services, and it is truly an honor to stand before you today as we gather to celebrate the life of Janet Matyaschuk. Janet was someone I had the privilege of knowing throughout my years here in Vermilion and Clandonald area. Like so many of you, my connection to Janet wasn't just an acquaintance, it was a bond. She had that steady way about her, the kind that made you feel welcomed without effort, included without question, and remembered long after the moment had passed. She wasn't loud in the way that she lived her life, but she was powerful in the way that she loved others. And today, as we sit here together, we come for 3 reasons: to grieve, to celebrate, and to lean on one another. With Janet, I think we all know those 3 things will intertwine beautifully. Because even in our sadness, there is so much joy tied to her memory. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, today we gather with hearts that are both heavy and grateful. Heavy because we miss Janet deeply, and grateful because we were blessed to know her. We thank you for the life that she lived, the kindness she showed, the laughter she shared, and the way she brought people together so effortlessly. We ask that you bring comfort to each person here today. In moments when grief feels overwhelming, replace it with peace. In moments when silence feels heavy, fill it with more memories. Help us carry forward Janet's legacy, not just in words, but in action. In kindness, in generosity, and in the simple act of showing up for one another. And may we find comfort in knowing that love like Janet's never fades. It continues on in every life that she touched. Amen. At this time, I would like to invite forward Janice Jackson to share the eulogy.
Good morning, family, friends, and community members. Thank you for joining us for this celebration of life for our friend and neighbor, Janet Matyaschuk. My name is Janice Jackson. I am the eldest daughter of Ralph and Pat Feenstra. Being close friends with my family, Janet has been a part of my life since I was 2. She was not our auntie, nor a grandma. She was just our Janet. Janet Louise Hall was born on March 23, 1940, and was the only daughter of Bobby and Bill Hall. She was raised as an only child on a farm south of Clandonald in the Island Hills School area. Janet's small family was made bigger with cousins on both sides, the Pataniaks and the Scarf families, who are represented here today. Janet attended Island Hill School until grade 8 and then completed high school in Vermilion. Friends who grew up in the Island Hill area remember Janet being super nice to kids and that she was jovial but reserved at the same time. A little known fact about Janet is that after high school, she trained as a teacher and taught in Clandonald for 3 years. And we all know that Clandonald has had some pretty great teachers. It was in 1959, while Janet was teaching in Clandonald, that a tall guy in a black cowboy hat started hanging around the young teacher and the Island Hills school community. Pete met Janet at square dance lessons in Clandonald, an activity that would become so very important for the rest of their lives. The tall guy with the black cowboy hat was really nice to kids too, and together they began a life supporting the local community and everyone else's children. Pete and Janet were married on Friday, July 6, 1961, at the First United Church in Vermilion. Their reception was held out at the Hall Farm. Janet left teaching and joined Pete in farming at their home north of Clandonald on the Raft Lake Road. Pete and Janet raised pigs, chickens, geese, cattle, horses, grain, and even sheep. They had dogs, and Janet's favorite, super fat cats with an exceptionally large number of toes. As young children, I had very blonde hair and blue eyes, while my sister Lori had dark hair and dark brown eyes. One spring, Pete and Janet had a set of twin calves born, one blonde and one brunette, and they named those calves Janice and Lori. And in addition to farming, Pete was a carpenter and Janet was an excellent homemaker. An interesting fact about their garden is that Pete and Janet made a point to share their seed potatoes with friends and neighbors when they sold in 2017 because the variety dated back to the 1940s and they didn't want it to die out. To supplement their farming and homemaking, Janet and Pete drove school bus for over 20 years, and then in later years, Janet also joined Judy Matyaschuk in oil field and residential painting. They were certainly never an idle couple. After Pete and Janet met at square dance lessons in 1959, square dancing kind of died down in Clandonald for several years. It wasn't until the mid to late 1970s that the Clandonald promenaders really got rockin'. I guess we can call this the new era of square dancing. On Friday night, sometimes with kids in tow, you could find Matyaschuk's, Herashuks, Feenstras, DeYoungs, Reps, Bardols, Jaremkos, Van Petigans, Radishes, Grandpa Feenstra, McCormick's, Stredwick's, Burdines, Hills, Hamlins, and more, along with all of our out-of-town friends, dancing, laughing, and causing mischief. The leaders of the mischief were Janet and my mother. Dancers from Harry Hill, Therian, Lloydminster, Vegreville, Bonnyville, Wainwright, Laclabish, and beyond loved to come to the Clandonald Promenaders dances. Our group was so much fun. We created lifelong friendships lasting outside the parameters of the dance hall. Square dancing was so important to our lives and really only lasted from the late 70s until the early to mid 90s. I have to tell you a few funny stories about Janet and square dancing. Together, Janet and Mum were always troublemakers. And while couples would be dancing in their squares of 8, Mum and Janet would randomly weave in and out of the squares trying to mix up the couples, or just replace a lady in the middle of a dance and she'd be left wondering what happened because she didn't have a partner anymore. Sometimes, while weaving around the ring, They would grab the top snap of a man's shirt and rip it open, or hook his belt buckle and open that too. They really were ridiculous, but so much fun. And before this new hall was built, we danced across the parking lot in the old hall. While cleaning downstairs after the luncheon, Janet and I found a mouse in a large brown paper bag. My mother is terrified of mice. And at the same time, Mom was upstairs talking and carrying her plate and visiting and saying goodbye to all of our friends who were leaving. And Janet and I decided it would be really funny to show my mom the mouse in the bag. And when we offered the bag, Mom thought we were collecting her garbage. And as she went to put her plate into the bag, the mouse jumped out of the bag and hooked onto her skirt. My poor mother was screaming and crying and hyperventilating, and she ran outside into the snow, and Janet thought she was going to have a heart attack. What started out as a prank went terribly wrong that night. And in square dancing, there were couples that would dance close to home, and there were those of us that would load up the van and head to communities like Therian or Harry Hill in the middle of the week. Pete and Janet, Peter and Judy, Mom and Dad, my sister and I, and sometimes Grandpa Wilbur, Leo, Reps or Bardoles would travel to other clubs. Our usual mode of transportation was my dad's big blue full-sized van. The front 8 seats would be loaded with adults, so my sister and I would sit in folding lawn chairs in the back surrounded by crinolines for our protection. And in Harry Hill, we have friends named Bill and Jane and Silver. And Silver is a bachelor who loved to be teased by Janet and Mum. Every January, Silver would invite his friends back to his place for a birthday celebration after the square dance. Jane would bring the cake. Janet and Mum would bring the mischief. And while Silver would be playing host, getting drinks and making coffee, Mum and Janet would barricade themselves inside Silver's bedroom and short sheet his bed and fill it with Rice Krispies and switch all the things in his drawers. One year, they changed all the labels on his tin can, so poor Silver didn't know if he was eating soup or cat food. They also tossed mini marshmallows in all his cupboards, Janet up high and Mum down low. Silver was finding mini marshmallows for months. Another favorite place to go square dancing was north of Vegreville at Art and Margaret Ziegler's farm. We would camp out. I was a kid, so I had to go to bed when the fun was just beginning, but I do know that Pete and Dad also got a reasonable amount of sleep. The year of the 25th anniversary party, Janet and Mum never went to bed and were up causing mischief with Leo and our friend Walter Betcher. They were rocking campers, pouring water through the roof vents, and starting tractors at 4 a.m. One last story is that Pete and Janet, Ralph and Pat, Henry Young, and our close friends Leopold and Josephine Langevin from Lac La Biche went on a holiday together. They flew to California and rented a vehicle. They took turns driving, but the best combination was Henry as driver and Pat as navigator, with the other 5 just having laughs in the back. They toured San Francisco, hit up Disneyland, ventured down to Tijuana, and circled back through Las Vegas. Back at home, Pete and Janet were huge supporters of our community. They loved the history of our area and had excellent memories of the businesses and owners from years gone by. They knew so many people that Janet would often be telling a story with random people's names like Carol or Stu, and we would have no idea what she was talking about. She thought that everyone knew all the same people that she did. She also forgot that her memories of Clandonald started 35 years before some of us. Another funny side note, and many of you have mentioned this to me, is Pete would be telling someone a story, and Janet would say, "No, that's not how it went." And Pete would reply, "Okay, you tell it." Pete and Janet loved their neighborhood and community. Pete and Janet's love of their neighborhood and community extended not just to Clandonald, but to Dewberry, Marwayne, Heinsberg, Elk Point, and beyond. They loved supporting all kinds of people and events like old-time dances, jamborees, dinner theaters, and concerts. Pete and Janet would come to neighborhood parties, family birthdays, campouts, and anything kid-related. They also loved supporting community suppers, teas, bus trips, Christmas concerts, and fairs. Pete and Janet loved the Elk Point Allied Arts performances so much that they or she attended all but one since the dinner theaters began 31 years ago. There's also one musician that Pete and Janet loved to support. They were huge fans of the country singer Brett Kissel. And from the first time they heard him at a talent show in Plamondon in 2003 at only the age of 13 years old, until Janet's last Brett concert with us at Vic Juba in 2024, they were invested. Brett knew them personally and autographed all their items. Pete and Janet joined him on the Brett and CFCW cruise in 2010 and flew to Las Vegas to join Brett's 21st birthday celebrations in 2011. Another group that Pete and Janet really took a strong liking to and were massive supporters of was the Vermilion Ukrainian Dance Association. Starting in 2005 and continuing for 12 or more years, Pete and Janet followed the dancers everywhere, particularly the senior dancers. What started with attending a year-end concert to support the Narot and young kids became so much more than that. Pete and Janet were groupies and were adopted by the Ukrainian dance community. Pete and Janet joined the dancers on road trips, malonkas, and competitions. They traveled with them by bus to destinations in Saskatchewan and Alberta, always riding in the front seat and greeting each dancer and family. In a very memorable trip to Grand Prairie for a competition, Narots remember Curtis's guitar string broke on the way there. And after arriving in Grand Prairie, in no time at all, Pete had located new strings so that Curtis's guitar could be repaired and ready for the ride home. But before they could get home, their Doc Holiday bus broke down in Grand Prairie. Another bus left Vermilion en route to rescue them, and the hotel gave the entire group one suite to share for the evening. When the replacement bus arrived around 9 p.m., the group headed out. Randy Borshuk was driving them, and they wouldn't get home until the wee hours of the morning. Pete and Janet took their places at the front seat as usual. Janet stayed awake for most or all of the trip home. But Pete, realizing this was going to be a tough drive for Randy, sat on the front step of the bus and visited for the entire ride home to help keep him awake and keep the group safe. And DeYoungs and Narots tell me Pete and Janet were always there in a quiet, gracious way, supporting not only the senior group, but all the groups of the Ukrainian Dance Association. And when they weren't being groupies or supporting every event around, Pete and Janet were excellent volunteers. They would join large organizations like the Clandonald Ag Society or the Clandonald Hall Committee, but they would also give their time to smaller causes as needed. Janet was one of the ladies who taught me how to sew. She and I made square dance dresses for my sister and I. Years later, when I was trying to teach my grades 6 to 9 students how to sew, Janet was one of the ladies who would come and help me every Friday afternoon. She was also part of our senior kids club at the school on Tuesday afternoons and would create crafts with our students. Janet's crafting extended beyond sewing. She enjoyed embroidery and later diamond dots and created a signed gift for each graduation, wedding, and baby that came along. And many of you in the crowd likely have your own Janet creations. Now, all of you friends and neighbors know that Pete and Janet like to get spooky. And the first time my mom met Janet was at Halloween in 1977 when Janet and her mom Bobby were dressed up in homemade clown costumes. As a child, I remember Janet and all of our square dance friends gathering in our old trailer to create ridiculous costumes for square dance parties. Pete built stilts for costumes. Twice I know that Janet sewed a half-man, half-woman costume, and those were fun times. Years later, Pete and Janet made sure their home was always decorated for Halloween to the delight of the neighborhood kids. All of us would make a point to bring our children to Pete and Janet's place. They loved to see the kids in their costumes, and you know, every one of us is currently thinking about popcorn balls. And near the end of their trick-or-treating days, my boys, Colt and Kai, and their friends, Silas and Trey, used to tease Janet about trading out popcorn balls for meatballs, because they really loved Janet's meatballs. And weren't they surprised the next year when Janet gave the same 4 boys their popcorn balls, and then, with a huge grin on her face, presented them with a container of meatballs and toothpicks so they could eat them in the truck as we drove from farm to farm. I have alluded to Janet's cooking, growing potatoes, popcorn balls, and now meatballs. That was one thing about Pete and Janet's house, you never went hungry. A couple of you have mentioned to me how tiny she used to roll her cabbage rolls. And when teaching my son Kent how to make her meatballs, she wasn't afraid to squish them up and throw them back in the bowl if he made them too big. Janet and Judy Matyaschuk also took Chinese food cooking lessons once. Janet was adventurous and liked to try new things. And speaking of new things, Janet also liked to make mystery food. She would cook some new recipe and then bring it to the coffee shop or an event and make us all try it and guess what the mystery ingredient was. And it was usually something gross, like brownies made with kidney beans. The final product itself was usually okay, but the mystery item always left us shaking our heads. Marie Cusack told me I really missed out on the biggest mystery of all. One year, Janet made a puffball casserole. I said, "Pardon?" And Marie said, "Yes, puffballs. They grow in your yard." She made a casserole out of them. And I said, "I'm glad I missed that one." Ugh. At the beginning of the eulogy, I referenced that Janet was raised as an only child in the Island Hills school area. In 1998, after our friend Josephine found a full biological sibling, Janet shared the story with her mum, Bobby. And to Janet's surprise, she too learned that she had a full biological older brother. Bill Shaw was 2 years older than Janet, and after a short search and some letters, their family was reunited. Pete, Janet, her mum Bobby, and second husband Leo traveled to Vancouver Island to meet Bill, his son Dave, daughter Nancy, and their families. Over the years, Bill made a trip to the farm at Clondonald and to Bobby's home. Years later, Pete and Janet took Ralph and Pat with them out to Vancouver Island for a second trip. Over the last 25 years, Janet and Bill kept in close contact. Nancy shares with me that they would enjoy a monthly Sunday morning phone conversation to catch up with each other's lives. Bobby, Bill, and Janet, as well as Bill's children, have a very striking resemblance and similar handwriting and mannerisms. In the Clondonald history book, at age 60, Janet wrote, "I am no longer an only child." In 2017, Pete and Janet had an auction sale, sold their farm to Kenny and Marie, and moved to the manor in Elk Point. In 2020, Pete passed away, and there was a small service during COVID times. In the last 5.5 years since Pete's passing, Janet's life was very full with the most wonderful friends and memory making. Janet had so many people looking out for her, and our friend circle grew too, with the addition of Marge Saranchuk and Terry Schell and Ivy Ferentz and Terry Shankowski. And the Clondonald group also stayed in touch. Gloria, Judy, Marie, Pat, and more all took turns driving Janet to appointments, coming for visits, and attending events. Many of us were lucky to sneak in invitations to some of those events. A couple of summers ago, I was asked to join the ladies when they went to the movies in St. Paul, and then they made me drive. The agenda was to go to the movies and then check out the renovated No Frills and then go for supper at Boston Pizza. Before we got out of the truck at the movies, the old girls were handing out Ziploc bags. And when we went to the movie counter, Janet handed the young girl her extra large Ziploc bag. I was still confused, but the young girl knew what to do, as this was routine. She filled Janet's popcorn and drink order and then put the bag of popcorn in the Ziploc bag and zipped it up so that it wouldn't spill while Janet was pushing her walker into the movie theater. There was no grease from the bottom of the popcorn bag to get all over her clothing during the movie. And at the end of the movie, when she hadn't finished eating all of her popcorn, she would just roll it up and zip it closed to transport it home. These ladies have retirement figured out. And besides popcorn bags, I learned two other very important tidbits from Janet and her Elk Point friends. The first is, Marge taught us that we each need 11 hugs a day to thrive. Marge, Janet, and all the ladies are or were very quick to collect those hugs, so don't be shy later when we're visiting. The second important tidbit is a phrase that is super helpful for those of us in the 50 and over crowd. In the middle of a conversation, when you can't remember what you're talking about, when you forget someone's name, or if you have no idea why you walked into a room, Janet had the perfect phrase. She would simply say, "I don't want to tell you that right now." And then she would get back to us in 2 minutes or 2 days or however long it took. On September 29th, we moved Janet from the Manor to Elk Point Lodge, and she loved it. She raved about the food, the jetted bathtub, and the care, and she wished she'd moved there sooner. Over the past couple of years, Janet was in and out of hospital a few times for several weeks at a time, both in Elk Point and in Edmonton. Because she was so handy with her iPhone and iPad, Janet was able to keep in touch with all of her friends and family. She loved following our adventures on Facebook, and we would leave the loveliest comments. She was also the queen of ordering things off Amazon for herself and her friends. Many of you were shocked to hear Janet passed away so quickly. You have no idea how shocked we were. On February 4th, while in Elk Point Hospital, Janet was her sharp, witty, usual self. In the morning, she texted Gloria, who was out buying her new pants, ate lunch with Marie and Judy, texted with Pat, welcomed an afternoon visit with Edward and Jade, and finished with a late afternoon visit with Ivy and her family. And Janet passed away at supper time. And we're all so happy that she had a great last day. Pete and Janet had no children of their own, but they may just have had the largest family of us all. The communities of Island Hill, Clandonald, Elk Point, the Shaws from Vancouver Island, the Pataniaks, the Scarf family, and all of their friends, past and present, were so important to them. And children always came first. Pete and Janet lived a humble life, but were so very generous. And as we continue on with our lives, may you pause to remember Pete and Janet fondly and think of them if you are offered a popcorn ball, hear a Brett Kissel song, attend a great community event, or pick up your Amazon package. They have left a legacy of friendship and community for us all. They will be missed.
At this time, I'd like to welcome forward Gloria DeYoung to share her tribute.
Thank you, Candace. I'd also like to share a couple of my memories of Janet and a little bit about Pete as well, and tell you about her generosity and the legacy that she's leaving our community. Now, I came to this community in 1983, and I came as a public health nurse to the Vermilion and Clandonald area. And I met Pete and Janet with square dancing, which is the thing that bonded all of us, when I was dancing with Leo. Now, Janet is the one that baked our engagement cake and threw us a surprise engagement party when we were engaged. She organized my bridal shower at the Old Hall. She danced, Pete and Janet both danced at our wedding with Pat and Ralph and I think Henry and Henry's old girlfriend. And they gifted us for our wedding a red wheelbarrow. And it was the wheelbarrow that stayed up at the house. It wasn't allowed to go down to the shop because I didn't want cement in it. And I used that wheelbarrow all the time. I put all my potatoes in it, all my squash. I had got special seeds from Janet to grow squash that is also hard to find seed because she was into that type of thing. And after about 25 years, I got a flat tire. And so I said to Pete, do I have warranty on this wheelbarrow? And he says, nope, there's no warranty after 25 years. So Leo just went and put a new tube in it, and it was fine, and I kept going, right? When I had my first child, Grace, it was, she had a baby shower for me, and she baked the cake. It was all fancy. She was a very good decorator as well. Pete built the cradle for her, and Janet painted it pink, but she had to wait till the morning after she found out that we had a girl, because back then you didn't have gender reveal parties back then, right? 33 years later, Grace then painted it gray because she had boys. So the cradle kept on going. Pete helped build our house, and Janet organized a surprise housewarming for us. Our lives continued. Janet and Judy painted our barn, and we danced, and we traveled, and we laughed, and we ate. And I remember one of those really bizarre recipes. It was eyeballs in cream. Oh, was it good? It was grapes in sour cream with sugar and brown sugar. Awesome. But might have sounded bizarre, but she could come up with the most delicious things. I could always ask Janet why my choke cherry jelly didn't gel, why it was liquidy. I could ask her, is it time to plant potatoes yet, Janet? And she would give you the approval or say, wait. She was my supplier of special seeds. She always had a wise advice or answer for me. Coincidentally, Janet and my mom are the same age. They were both born in 1940, and both of their phone numbers ended in 2092. So she, in a way, was like my second mother. Once when I was visiting her in a hospital in Vermilion, they actually said, oh, your mom is in 306. And I just didn't even bother correcting them. I thought, what's the point, right? So, okay, mom's in 306. I went to see Janet. That's the way it was. And as Janice had mentioned, she came to every school concert. They sat in the front row. They watched all our children grow up. They could name the kids in the school. They came to all of our Malankas, our festivals, all those it would have been Saskatoon, Grand Prairie, Yorkton, all the bus trips with us. Watched my daughters dance, watched the Narot kids dance, the Borschuks, watched me dance. Pete even went and spent $100 to buy one of our brooms when we did a dance, and actually the picture of the broom is on the front of the book. He wanted that broom. He paid $100 for it. They adopted not only my kids, Janice's and Laurie's, but they adopted 40 other Ukrainian dance kids. They became their grandchildren, and our lives were woven together. When Pete passed away in July of 20 during COVID, Leo and I hosted 18 people on our yard after the interment, because that's all you could do. And it was done outside, and Sharon had catered it, just like she's catering it today. And that's pretty well actually all that Janet wanted. And Janet didn't want very much after she passed away, but Terry Shankowski had a chat with her and said, you know, Janet, there's people that will miss you and that loved you and knew you, and we should honor you. And that's why we came together and planned this event today. And I wanted to take a moment to thank Pat and Janice for all the work they've done. Pat has gone through pictures like you wouldn't believe. And Janice did a lot of work with setting this up. She did a beautiful job of the display. Please take time to take a look at some of the mementos. I mean, you can see the Brett Kessel signed autograph items and a lot of the pictures that she's put together. And Janice didn't mention, though, that the square dancing outfits are actually, Janet sewed them for Pete and Pat. Ralph and Pat, I mean. So, yeah. So do take time, and I want to thank them for their support in helping us put together this event. Now, it is only right to highlight their contributions to our community and the legacy that they're leaving. They have bestowed significant amounts of funding to our organizations that they were involved with over the years. I want to start with here in Clandonald. This will include the Rysilvia Ukrainian Community Association, the Clandonald Fire Department, the Wellsdale Public Cemetery just east of town where she will be buried, and that is where Pete is buried and her mum, Bobby. And it is to note that Pete actually was president of our cemetery there at Wellsdale. And so then when he passed, we had to have a meeting during COVID to replace him. The Clandonald 4-H Multi-Club. And two of the organizations that they were most involved with, Clandonald and District Recreation Association, which is this hall. Pete helped build this hall. She worked tirelessly in this kitchen, and that was a significant part of their lives. The Clandonald Ag Society, another internal organization that they were involved with. When they finished their volunteerism with the Clandonald Ag Society, and before they moved to Elk Point, they were gifted a beautiful clock. And when we were looking at some of her belongings, we thought, what should we do with the clock? And so I went to Ron Matyaschuk and I returned the clock, and it is now in the Chrome Dome. So those of you that are local know where the Chrome Dome is. And I've heard comments from the other members that, yep, Janet's clock is back at the Chrome Dome. Elk Point is where they most recently resided. They will be leaving gifts there to the Elk Point Fire Department, the Elk Point Seniors Recreation Center, the Riverview Seniors Citizen Center, and that's in Heinsberg, where Janet was also a regular and active member, the Elk Point Heritage Lodge, where she only lived 5 months, but like Janice had said, she should have moved there earlier. They treated her like a queen. She said, if only my health would have been better to enjoy it more. And another major integral part was, as Janice mentioned, the Elk Point Regional Allied Arts Society, where she never missed any of those dinner theaters. Besides Clandonald and Elk Point, she has gifted the First United Church in Vermilion, the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 11 in Vermilion, and VUCA, which is the Vermilion Ukrainian Cultural Association, or our dancing group. And that's to support, she wanted them to continue to support Ukrainian dancing and performances there. In addition, Border Paws Animal Shelter Society, previously known as the Lloydminster District SPCA, because we all know she loved her cats that received gourmet food. She actually cooked the liver for them before they ate it. It was very, very well-treated animals. Also, the Shock Trauma Air Rescue Service Foundation, known as STARS. Finally, hanging in the 30s, the Cancer Support Society in Mallaig. 17 organizations will benefit from Pete and Janet's generosity. May their legacy live long.
So in speaking of which, actually, though it didn't work out when Janet and Pete both had passed away, years previous to their passing, they'd actually met with me, just speaking of her generosity of spirit, and they actually wanted to donate their bodies to the anatomical gift program. Unfortunately, there's specific standards that that you need to fall within in order for that donation to come to fruition, and they fell outside of those standards. But in saying that, that is what they always had planned, was even in their passing, They wanted to give back. Very, very generous people. We're now going to take a few moments to reflect and remember as we watch a slideshow celebrating Janet's life, a life full of friendship, laughter, and unforgettable moments.
This 94.4 gets me A to B. This old tin roof ain't never had a leak. Who needs a swimming pool when you got a creek? Yeah, this guy's got everything you'll ever need. I don't need six figures, my bank account bigger. Pile of cash don't make me richer. Give me a wraparound porch swing, swinging. 5-acre pond with a night crawler sinking. Girl in my hand, the other one drinking that Bud Light. Yeah, that's my kind of money. I'm good with what the good Lord's giving. Dirt under my boots in the air I'm breathing. Lose every penny, I'd still be winning. I'm trying to make a life, not a living. Trying to make a life, not a living. Now you can't take nothing with you when you go. The time that you got's about as good as gold. Got a girl that I love that I get to hold. Thank God for what I got and not what I don't.
Well, now you join up hands, make a ring, gonna circle to the left like everything, then reverse trail along in single file. Ladies, step right out, go the other way back, turn your partner by the right way, you get back, left allemande, and weave the ring a while. Well, pretty soon he began to see how the auctioneer talked rapidly, do-sa-do and promenade from here. He said, oh my, it's do or die, I've gotta learn that auction cry, gotta make my mark and be an auctioneer. Well, now it's 1 3/2 square through, do-sa-do, that outside two, go all the way around, make a right-hand star, you do. Heads a left-hand star in the middle of town, you turn that star, go once around to the same old two, when you do the right and left through. Inside arch and dive through, pass through, swing through, and then those boys trade and promenade that day. $25 bid now, $30, 30 will it give me 30, make it 30 bid and form a $30. Who will give me 30 now? Who will make a $30 bid? Well, now it's 1 and
cowboy boots and a real big dent in my revenue. If I ain't done it all, just means I ain't done it yet. When I look back, I don't want to have one single regret. I'm gonna soak up the sun, keep the wind in my sails, try to get to heaven while I raise a little hell. When it's all said and done, smoke a Cuban cigar. I'm gonna dance with my baby to some slow-mo town. I'm gonna live it up so much, I ain't never gonna live it down. Till then I'll soak up the sun, keep the wind in my sails, try to get to heaven while I raise a little hell. When it's all said and done, I'll know I lived it well. If I ain't got nothing but a few good stories to tell. Yeah, gonna be a few crazy ones, probably be a few hazy ones. But man, when my days are done, it'll make a good book. Till then I'll
soak up the sun, keep the wind in my sails,
try to get to heaven while I raise a little hell. When it's all said and done, I know I lived it well.
heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. Life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, growing like a breeze. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, all my memories gather round her. Miner's lady, stranger to blue water. Dark and dusty, painted on the sky. Misty taste of moonshine, teardrop in my eye. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, I hear her voice in the morning hour. She calls me. The radio reminds me of my home far away. Driving down the road, I get a feeling that I should have been home yesterday. Yesterday, country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, take me home. Country roads, take me home. Country roads.
As we reflect on Janet's life, one thing becomes incredibly clear. She understood what truly mattered. Not in a loud or showy way, but in a steady, consistent, deeply meaningful way. She understood that life is not about rushing the days. It's about who you sit with, who you laugh with, and who you show up for. And Janet showed up. She showed up for her community. She showed up for her friends. She showed up for children, for neighbors, for events, dances, and conversations. She showed up again and again and again. And in doing so, she built something that so many people spend a lifetime searching for: connection. You heard it in the stories. From square dancing halls filled with laughter, to bus rides and road trips, to acts of kindness like teaching someone to sew, to showing up with food, no matter how mysterious it might have been, with crafts and with encouragement. Janet didn't just attend life, she participated in it fully. And maybe one of the most beautiful things about her life is that she didn't have children of her own, yet somehow she became part of everyone's family. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens because of how someone loves, because of how they treat people, and because of how they make others feel. Janet made people feel seen. She made them feel included. And she made people feel like they mattered. And in today's world, that's something that's incredibly rare and incredibly valuable. We often struggle with loss because we feel like something has been taken away from us. And in a way it has. We miss her presence, her voice, the way that she would show up and make everything just a little bit better. But what hasn't been taken away is what she gave. And what she gave is still here. It lives in your memories and in your habits. It lives in the way that you treat one another going forward. Every time you go out of your way to include someone, bring food to a gathering, laugh until your sides hurt, support a local event, or even hear a Brett Kissel song, or perhaps throw mini marshmallows in somebody else's cabinets. You're continuing something that Janet started. Grief is not something that we just get over. It's something that we learn to carry. And over time, that grief changes. Today, and in the last couple of months, it felt heavy, may even feel sharp, may feel overwhelming. But one day it softens. And when it does, what remains is not just loss, but the love. Because the depth of our grief is simply a reflection of the depth of our love. Janet's life reminds us of something simple but powerful. You don't have to do extraordinary things to live an extraordinary life. You just have to love people well. And she did. I'd like to close with a poem that I had read at Pete's service as well. When tomorrow starts without me. When tomorrow starts without me, and I'm not there to see. If the sun should rise and find your eyes all filled with tears for me. I wish so much you wouldn't cry the way you did today. While I'm thinking of the many things we didn't get to say. I know how much you love me as much as I love you. And every time you think of me, I know you'll miss me too. But when tomorrow starts without me, please try to understand. Then an angel came and called my name and took me by the hand. And said my place was ready in heaven far above. And that I'd have to leave behind all those I dearly love. But as I turned and walked away, a tear fell from my eye. For all my life, I'd always thought I didn't want to die. I had so much to live for. I had so much to do. It seemed almost impossible that I was leaving you. I thought of all the yesterdays, the good ones and the bad. I thought of all the love we shared and all the fun we had. If I could relive yesterday, I thought, just for a while, I'd say goodbye and kiss you and maybe see you smile. So when tomorrow starts without me, don't think we're far apart. For every time you think of me, I'm right here in your heart. Oh man, that got me. Oh, what a blessing that Janet's in heaven with her husband and the friends that have gone before her. On behalf of Janet's family and friends, thank you so much for being here today, for your presence, your support, and for the love you've shown not just today, but throughout Janet's life. You're warmly invited to stay for a time of fellowship and refreshments, where stories will continue, laughter will return, and Janet's spirit will be felt in every shared moment. The interment of the urn, because the weather doesn't know what on earth it is doing, will be happening on a later date at the Wellsdale Cemetery. Will the congregation please rise?
beneath that old oak tree. The day we laid my grandpa down. For 13 years I'd been a shadow, his little man. I was learning what hurt was all about. That was the first time I ever saw my daddy cry. And he said, son, that's the thing about life. Yeah, the rain's gonna fall on us all. Your heart's gonna break sometimes, but there's no way around it. Life's full of mountains